about the story of the project itself, but the benefits that were realized immediately, and then the benefits that the company has seen over the last 18 months. So we'll start out with, here's the agenda for today. We're going to start out with some introductions, and then we're going to talk about the Maritz journey and the partnership that we have between Maritz, Kest, and Oracle. We'll talk about the options that were considered when they were moving from on-premise to the cloud. I think that's a decision point that every company is looking at. And so it'll be interesting to hear from Ron how they made those choices in those different items. Then we'll talk about the project itself and the benefits that were realized after the project was live, both immediately and in the last 18 months. And then finally, we'll talk to you about some lessons learned and things that you hopefully can take away for your own project. So I'll hand it over right now to Ron to introduce himself. Ron?
Thank you, Alyssa, and thanks, Mike, for having me. And I appreciate everybody who's taking time out of their day to sit in on this and learn about what we've done. So, Ron Hunsaker, Senior Vice President at Maritz. Long history with the e-business suite. Started working with it back in the middle 90s, and like most of us in IT, love working with diverse technologies and fast-paced, which has certainly been the case for all of us the last couple weeks here. Faster than ever. So if you go to the next slide, Alyssa, a little bit about yourself.
Yes, so I'm Alyssa Johnson. I'm Vice President of Business Solutions at Kest. I also serve on the OATUG Board of Directors, and I work on, helping to lead multiple projects, transformational projects, strategic thought leadership. I'm certified in both EBS and ERP Cloud, and co-authored the Release 12 primer, presenting to users about new Oracle technologies, successful case studies. That's one of the favorite parts of my job. So I appreciate, again, y'all taking the time today to listen to our success story. Ron?
Sure, a little bit about Maritz. We are a privately held company in Fenton, Missouri, which is just slightly southwest of St. Louis, Missouri. We have several major business units. One of those is our Maritz Global Events, which is really about incentive trips and business events. So, obviously not been good for us. So just think big trade shows and big conferences, much like Collaborate. We schedule and plan those from beginning to end, book the hotels, the whole administration around those events. And then we have a motivation company. Really think about loyalty and rewards programs. So, Marriott, Hilton, Southwest. We run a ton of those point programs for those various companies, and then allow those participants to redeem those points for merchandise. We have a warehouse we ship stuff out of. They may redeem for travel, or even some instances, folks redeem points for cash, depending on which of those options our clients want to offer. And we have operations in North America and Europe, roughly $1 billion in revenue. Next slide.
So I'll share a little bit about Kest. We've partnered with Maritz since 2016. As Ron goes through the roadmap of where they've been with Oracle, we joined them when they were upgrading from 11i to 12.2, and they've been with them ever since. Our focus is delivering sophisticated digital solutions for complex business problems. We really focus on the business aspect of it in terms of providing those solutions. We're headquartered in Plano, Texas. We've been in business about 15 years. We do provide solutions across the stack, the Oracle stack. We're also a Salesforce partner, so because we have customers from a lead to cash perspective that use Salesforce as well. We have a solutions center in Hyderabad, India, and specifically to this project, we are experts in multi-cloud scenarios, and I think you'll see that as we go through the presentation, how we partnered with Maritz to realize that. Hey, Ron?
Sure, thanks, Alyssa. So I'm going to take a minute and just talk about our journey specifically on the e-business suite. So we've been running this product for 31 years. Our first instance was spun up back in 1989. Back then, we had multiple instances. So through the 90s, there were multiple instances of the e-business suite on campus. And around 2001, we centralized into a single 11.5.10 instance. And then for the next, 10 to 12 years, we really just enriched the ecosystem of systems around our ERP, which I suspect is similar to many of you folks on the call. We put in systems like budgeting and planning. We put in T&E system. In fact, we went through multiple T&E products, product called Extensity. Ultimately, we landed with Concur, which is where we're at today. During that time, we also consolidated to a single project accounting solution within the ERP system itself, Oracle Projects. We had 10 different time systems on campus. We do a lot of professional services work, and we run our company based on project work, and so capturing labor is a big component of that. But it was very tough to manage that with 10 systems. So we consolidated that down to one. We had 3 separate billing systems. We put in Vertex, which is a sales and use tax software. So really spent a lot of years getting the company kind of healthy from a back office standpoint. And then comes the big event that I'm sure everybody remembers, the 11.5.10 going on to sustaining support. And we really trying to figure out what are we going to do with the ERP. We'd put Workday in, HCM right around the same time, and we're just really trying to figure that out. And we made the decision ultimately to stick with the e-business suite, which I think was a great decision. And so that led us to doing an assessment, planning and prep for that, team selection, and ultimately that's how we got introduced to Kest and Alyssa. And the decision was made to upgrade the ERP to 12.2.5. So we went straight from 11.5.10 to 12.2.5. We did that in August of 2016, which has really, allowed us to continue to leverage that investment. And so we did the upgrade, and then directly ahead of us, you'll notice in that section, onboarding of MGE and onboarding of Experience. So during that timeline, our travel company acquired a smaller company that was running a separate ERP system. So we had a lot of work laid out in front of us here on continuing to bring business units and business functionality onto the ERP. And we were faced with a big hardware decision that I'll talk about in a later slide here. What are we going to do? And so, to solve that, we knew all of that was out in front of us. And so we made the decision to go to OCI in 2018. So just to pause here for a second, 2016, we upgraded to 12.2.5, had some business unit efforts staring us in the face. We had a platform problem, and we went to OCI in 2018. And then we'll talk later in the presentation about how we've continued to enrich that. But since we've been there, we've migrated through this time that this slide doesn't show. We were on Discover. We went to BIX, the Business Intelligence Cloud Service. We've ultimately landed with Oracle Analytics Cloud with Autonomous Database underneath that. So we'll talk more about that. We've spun up integrated identity cloud services, and more recently, remote access to the ERP that, again, I'll cover in a later slide. So that's kind of been our journey for just this platform. And when you look at the amount of change that we've put in the last 4 years, it's been an incredible amount of change. And certainly the OCI platform, the cloud services has allowed us to continue to accelerate in that space. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this was this is a slide I've used a lot that really talks about, you know, the state of the platform. What was our health? And I really try to give you a before and an after picture. And so this is before we moved to to OCI. So I kind of alluded to, we did the R12 upgrade, but we had 27 systems running on that aging hardware that was in our data center. So we were running on Solaris boxes that were 9 years old. We had limited support staff to support those. And when I say limited, at the time I had a single Oracle DBA and 2 Solaris admins, one of which was getting ready to retire. We were running Solaris, so we weren't really sure at the time. We were struggling on where's Oracle going with that operating system. So we felt it wasn't strategic. Our excuse me, our disaster recovery at the time when we were on premise was super complicated. We had a third-party provider in place called SunGuard, and you know, I suspect many of you have been in these situations. Our strategy was, well, we're going to ship our tapes to a remote location, go through a rebuild process, and spin up our production servers there. And you know, that translated to about a 72-hour window. You know, I had limited ability to control my infrastructure costs, so us being a holdings company, I have to recover my costs out to the business units, and a lot of infrastructure IT costs. Even though I'm in IT, the infrastructure costs were coming my way, and I had limited ability to control those. And just the hardware being 9 years old, it was struggling with the workload, and really we didn't have much agility. We couldn't scale, and you know, security was a problem I was looking to solve. And so, you know, when you think about after, well, I'll talk about this a little bit later, but those were kind of some of the key challenges that we were faced. And so, you know, I'm happy to report that you can see after we did this migration, all of those things are better. And when I say better, you know, we've really solved obviously the aging hardware issue, because we're running an OCI, which is state of the art now. We put a managed service contract in place with Kest. So Alyssa and her team, they really help with managing the DBAs, in any patching work that needs to be done at the OS level. They'll help us with that. And of course, you know, her team's great with e-business suite support. So we lean on them for that also. During the lift and shift, we migrated away from Solaris and we went to Linux. So not only did we lift and shift from on-prem to the cloud, we did a re-platform in place, or re-platform as part of that project. And now, you know, I have much better control over my cost. And I'd like to speak for a minute about the second to last bullet there: speed, agility, scalability, and security. So, you know, it was a pretty easy sell to sell this to the you know, our C-suite, when you start thinking about the ability to scale up and scale down, and just spin servers up in the cloud. Those things they really understand. But the nail in the coffin that really helped me sell this was, you know, as part of the subscription within OCI, our data is now encrypted at rest. So, you know, Oracle's really good about throwing in all the features of the database, where before, when we were on-prem, if you wanted to run, you know, you wanted to turn on compression, or if you wanted to do encryption at rest, you know, those you had to pay for each of those. All that stuff's included as part of the subscription. So really, just from a platform perspective, we really solved a ton of problems by moving out of our data center into OCI. Next slide, please. Thank you. I wanted to give you a little bit of a when I said 27 applications, I wanted to give you a little overview of kind of the portfolio that we're running. So obviously within the e-business suite, there's the list of the modules that we have running, typical financials, plus project accounting. I talked a little bit about our motivation company, where folks, you know, earn points and then have redemption. So that's our Oracle inventory module. And then more recently, we've spun up property management and fixed assets. So those are a couple of projects that we've just done here within the last couple of years. we've done those on R12. We have a very large custom applications. This is an Oracle backend with Oracle Forms, Oracle Reports, Oracle Apex, all sitting in front of that. And so, again, these are very strategic systems for Maritz. We have some very unique billing requirements that we felt we could meet better through a custom solution through the core ERP project. I talked about our single time system, so that's custom. So again, very large footprint here. And then our third-party products, Vertex, which is sales and use tax, a product called Telesoft, which is our telephony management, and then MarkView, which is a Kofax, it's AP automation solution. And I want to point this one out specifically because it not only has Oracle components and WebLogic components, there's Windows servers, Linux, and some SQL Server databases. So we lifted all of that to OCI as part of this. And then we had a lot of middleware products that all ran in our data center. So Adaptive is our budgeting and forecasting solution. That's a SaaS. There's an integration product there. It says Bix Data Loader. Need to get the slide updated. That's really the OAC middleware now. And then Oracle Access Manager and Identity Manager. And then interestingly enough, we also spun up an Oracle Gateway that we punch out to Azure to bring some of the data out of a SQL Server database running in Azure into our Oracle Analytics Cloud to do some dashboarding for one of our departments. So that kind of gives you hopefully a feel of the footprint that we moved, the e-business suite, a custom solution, and some third-party products is the scope of what was moved. Next slide. Okay, great. Yeah, so I'm going to walk you through the options that we went through here. So, yeah, our first decision here was really what do we do? And I touched on this a little bit. We knew that we needed to make a decision around the operating system. So again, we felt Solaris might not be strategic for Oracle. It certainly wasn't strategic at Maritz. I only had a couple folks that were supporting it, and I talked about that key retirement. So we were very short-staffed, and we heard in the industry, better performance on Linux, and we kept hearing that that's the direction Oracle was going. So we kind of went through a series of meetings, and that was really called our Gate 1. And I think if you press the next, yep, there you go, Lisa. So out of that, the decision was made, hey, we're going to go Linux, right? And we really moved on to Gate 2. The decision is, okay, do we stay in our data center or do we go to the cloud? And again, as we kind of looked around and took a look at the landscape, I feel we're pretty progressive at Maritz. We're pretty cloud friendly, so we had a desire to move the ERP to the cloud. We felt doing so would really allow us to refocus our DBA on the BU systems that have Oracle backends, and really allow my development staff to focus on more business value. And then certainly, Oracle's engineered these platforms, so we really felt like any cloud solution provider gonna have their platforms in their cloud environments probably engineered better than what we can do on-prem. So I think if you hit the down arrow, what came out of that decision was, yep, we know we're going Linux and we know we want to go to the cloud. So now where do we go? And really to help make this decision, we went through a process called eCal that Oracle put on the, I believe it was the Enterprise Cloud Adoption Lifecycle. And I wasn't really sure of the benefit that I was going to get out of that exercise, but it proved to be very, very valuable. And so, what came out of that was we felt like we could really simplify our disaster recovery environment. We're probably going to get better. We need to increase our performance. So where do we think we're going to get the best performance and give us the chance to reduce our systems? And so what came out of that was really, if you hit the next button, please. Yep, what really came out of that was we felt like Oracle was the clear choice for systems that are either Oracle owned or running on Oracle. we didn't feel anybody's going to have better performance or scalability for their OCI was a strategic direction for Oracle. We felt that they're going to be continuously making improvements and innovation drive into that. And really, from a cost perspective, we really felt like this was a much better long-term play for us, moving those systems that I spoke to, moving those to OCI versus Amazon or Azure or some other cloud provider. And then as part of the deal, we negotiated a 3-year price protection. And then what this really allowed me to do once we moved there was a reduction in my overall cost of technology and labor. So I touched on this briefly. I have to recover all of my cost for my department out to the business unit. So I'm fully recoverable. And so at the end of this exercise, what it really allowed me to do was provide a ton more value to the enterprise, set us up for agility, and I'm doing that for less cost. Alyssa, you want to walk the folks through the project?
Yeah, thanks, Ron. That was a great background on where the current state was, the decisions that the Maritz leadership team went through to come to the decision to lift and shift their EBIS system to OCI. And so now I'm going to take you through the project and what that looked like. So first I want to talk about kind of the overall implementation scope. So we did do dev, test, prod, and disaster recovery, all within the scope of this project. We also, in addition, stood up an additional instance, Sandbox, and so came out of the project on the other side with them having the access to an additional instance. This project had some complexities that we've noted here. Ron already talked about the Solaris to Linux migration, and there's tooling in EBS to do the lift and shift in a more automated fashion if you're going Linux to Linux. But we had the complexity of also doing the platform migration. We did not do that, on premise. That was part of, again, the lift and shift to do that migration. We also updated their databases, and this is again was a area where they got some additional value. On premise, they were on single node and moved them to rack, and that provided them the high availability that they had lacked before. And so, being able to move to this modern infrastructure really, again, provided the opportunity to make some changes to give them that additional benefit. They also chose to implement database as subscribe to database as a service, the Extreme Performance Edition. So that particular edition has features such as the compression, such as active data guard. There were quite a few features there that were attractive to them. And so they were, again, able to leverage those where they wouldn't have been able to in an on-premise environment. Ron also talked about the security features in terms of the data being encrypted at rest. And so they were able to implement that as well. We migrated, after the infrastructure was built out in OCI, we migrated EBS custom applications and the supporting middleware. So that entire footprint that Ron showed in the previous slide was migrated through repeated iterations for both dev, test, prod, and DR. And I'm going to show you the project timeline here in a second, and I'll show you what we did there. Another place where they were able to get some added benefit is their MarkView system, which, as Ron indicated, was their AP imaging solution. They were actually 5 versions behind before we did the migration, and so they worked with Kofax, which is the third party with that system, and they upgraded that system. So now they're latest and greatest in terms of MarkView and OCI. And then they had another third-party application, Telesoft, which was one version behind it. So they did the upgrade for that as well, and got, you know, again, you can see the process there that we went through for each of the environments, provisioning the compute and the storage, installing the software, migrating and deploying the configurations, and then the post-migration sync up between the database and the app tiers, and then testing and QA. Always, testing is a very important component, and we'll talk about that in a subsequent slide. So let me talk you through the project timeline. That's a question that you know, I often get. You know, how long does it take to do it? And it does depend. There's a lot of dependencies, right? The complexity of the project. So again, we have the Solaris to Linux migration that we had to do. If there's any upgrades that you're doing, are you upgrading your database at the same time? Are you upgrading your applications at the same time? That can add to the timeline. I will point out here that the size of the database, that's another question we'll get, is about 3 terabytes for each, you know, instance. So that gives you, you know, it's not a small, you know, so many gigabyte size database. 3 terabytes, pretty good size. We started in December with the planning and design, and that's a critical phase, right? Getting the architecture decided and all the plans made is so critical to the project success. And so I think both of us would agree that that was a key point in the, you know, in the project. January, we took for the infra build. We had some challenges just in terms of logging in. That seemed like, okay, that seems to be like you should be able to do that, but who knows? You know, you face different challenges. So that's probably, that was the month build time is longer than we would typically take for that based on that. Now you'll notice here in the dev build that we actually did 2 rounds of the development migration. The reason that we did that is Maritz has a cadence that they use to refresh from prod to their non-production instances. They do that once a year because they have ancillary external systems that feed in that only refresh once a year. So to get everybody synced up, that's why they do it that way. And so we actually did the initial dev build and then did a whole nother dev migration with the refreshed data from production. And you can see that we were fully transitioned to OCI for the development environment in April. And so at that point, you know, development was in OCI, test and prod and DR were still on premise. So, you know, again, an iterative approach. I'll talk here in a minute about the integrations. They have over, Maritz has over 100 integration points. And so that was really critical that be thoroughly tested. And there's lots of different types of integrations that they use as well. That's another question that we get a lot of times is, you know, what about the latency once you move into the cloud? And happy to report that overall, most of the integrations had no problems at all in terms of the latency. The few that we did find were actually where we could tweak the code and, you know, eliminated the latency. So, and I'll make the point as well that we are not using Fast Connect. That's also a tool that's available for, you know, extended throughput, but we're not using that. We're just using a straight VPN connection. So happy to report that the, you know, latency was not, you know, a concern at all once we got everything up and going. Notice as well on the test, we did actually 3 iterations of the test. Well, no, we did the test build, okay, so the infrastructure build, and then we did 2 more runs of test. We did kind of the opposite order this time. We did the first, the test refresh. And so we were fully transitioned to OCI by 6/1. And then we did an additional dry run of tests, just kind of putting a separate instance up there. And so that gave us the confidence to move into the production build. And again, testing of the integrations. When we started in July for the production build, we got that done, quickly. We did a dry run in production as well to make sure everything would go smoothly. And then we did the DR build. It was very important to Maritz and to us to have DR fully ready to go as soon as we went live, because you could have a disaster the next day. Not likely, but you want to plan for that. So July and August were very busy. We did have a staged migration. So there were three applications that we felt were very low risk, easy to migrate up. And so we did those ahead of the actual cutover weekend. And so those three were actually running in prod OCI before we did the cutover. By 8:20, we were actually fully transitioned to OCI, and it's ironic. It was to the day, I think, to the weekend of when we cut over in 2016, doing the upgrade from 11i to 12.2, and when we transitioned to OCI. So that was memorable for us, just because we were sitting at a restaurant celebrating, and it was the same day actually that we had done the same thing for the transition to EBS 12.2. I will say that all of the iterations, as we did the cutover weekend, the hours, it took about 70 hours for the full migration weekend, because we had done our due diligence ahead of time. The Maritz had performed their testing. We'd gotten SRs, resolved from Oracle previously. We actually were able to move through the cutover weekend without opening a single SR. So we were very happy about that. And I just think shows the diligence that the entire project team put into the project, and the health of the applications and the infrastructure that we were able to do that. So they were off and running, and then had a month of hypercare. Ron, do you have anything you want to add before I go forward?
No, I think actually I do. I think the approach that we took with you guys, the very iterative process, works really well. And I'm glad you touched on the networking, the VPN. So, we really weren't sure what to do there. And so when our systems were still in our data center, I asked our security and network teams to just kind of monitor the traffic going to and from our specific servers and instances. So, that's the approach we took. We monitored that traffic for a month, and we felt that based on our existing VPN connection to the internet, we didn't need to go fast connect or anything like that. And so, I would say, don't assume going into this that you have to go the fast connect route. Anyway, it worked out fine for us. So that's what I would add. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, great, Ron. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about integrations. Again, this is a key point, I think, for most companies. This is one of their integration diagrams that they had, and one of the things I applaud Maritz for is that they were very well documented in all of their integration endpoints. This is one of the diagrams, and they had it all in a spreadsheet with everything that needed to be tested. So having that inventory up front really helped us as far as moving forward in the deployment and in the testing of those integrations. You can see here now, what I wanted to illustrate here is to make sure that all of the integration types are functioning, right? On the left-hand side, you see that there's many systems that were still left on premise at Maritz. Some of the key ones in purple were their order management system, their WMS system, some of the key ones that were still there. MarkView had some components, desktop components. Then OCI, you can see everything that we migrated up into the cloud, right? So we have all of the middleware agents, we have EBS 12.2, we have their full cuts, which is set on the Oracle databases. We put Vertex because Vertex, again, is very tightly integrated to what's going on in EBS. And so we moved Vertex up there. And then we had some of the, like I said, the middleware that was syncing with some of the cloud applications. And so they have a myriad of public cloud applications. And again, no problem integrating those with any of the applications in OCI. These are some of those that you'll recognize that maybe some of you on the call use: Workday, Adaptive, Blackline. I know a lot of our customers use Blackline. Concur, another very popular application for expenses. All of these, Salesforce, got that one down there at the bottom. All of these are integrating seamlessly with OCI. We even see something that sits on Azure that's integrating. So we have direct cloud connections, a lot of database links, ODBC, we have a gateway listener, XML gateway, and REST web services. So a lot of different types of integration types, all of those fully supported and fully functioning on OCI.
Hey, Alyssa, before you leave this,
Sure.
Alyssa, can you go back? Yeah, I would just add, I would add three things. So one, the system over there on the left called OneFS, you know, we had a handful of queries that from that system, when we moved everything there in the middle, when we moved that out of our data center, you're introducing a little bit of latency there. When I say a little bit, I believe we're running at around 18 to 19 milliseconds, I think, is the maybe it's slightly longer than that. The trip to Virginia and back to St. Louis, right? So every database request now has that latency, right? And so we did have to tweak a few queries in there. When I say a few, it was less than a dozen. We had that going on. Secondarily, we have also started doing web services now to the stuff back on the left. So there's no yellow boxes, but we've introduced that since we've been to OCI. No issues there. The only thing that you need to look at when you're doing this is if you have an application that's really, really chatty. And so we did cause a little bit of an impact to our corporate tax department. That Vertex system there in the middle, they have the returns module. So we do business in all 50 states. You know, there's just tons of tax information, and so each month we have to file a return. And so they use a desktop product that we call it very chatty. It makes tens of thousands of calls back out to the Vertex database in OCI. So the returns preparation process, we added about an hour or so to that for the tax department. But I can honestly say outside of that, there has been no other negative impact that we've noted over the last few years by moving this stuff to the cloud. So my point to the folks on the phone is, look at your architecture, understand the technologies and the products the best you can when you're moving this stuff out of your data center, and just be on the lookout for stuff that, that's poorly written code that's going to make a bunch of database calls, because you probably want to zero in on those and see if you can tune those in advance. That's all I want to say.
Yeah, thanks, Ron. I'm doing a quick time check, so we'll keep going through here, because I definitely want Ron to have a few minutes to talk about the benefits. This is just the current state production, so I didn't do a diagram for each of the other instances. The one comment I want to make about this is the containerization, right? So the structure in OCI is CDB, PDB. So you're going to have the containerized databases. And so it was important to understand that. That'll be new for a lot of you. Don't have that structure today. But it does help you in terms of, patching at the container level instead of at the individual database levels. So there's benefit even going into that. And as you upgrade your databases, those are going to require that anyway. So it was a good move, I think, for Maritz to have that, and in terms of maintenance has been an improvement and cuts down on the amount of time, that patching takes, et cetera. Okay, so let's get into the benefits. That's really where we want to be. So Ron, why don't you take us through what we realized initially?
Sure. I see a couple different slides here. This first one is what we've presented, just like it says, initial benefits realized. So I touched on some of this earlier. So just working from left to right here, our hardware refresh, we were running on 9-year-old hardware, moving to OCI, check, huge benefit there. More effective use of our resources. I'm no longer in the hardware business. And what I mean by that for me personally is I used to spend a lot of time working with vendors, speccing out machines, just for the procurement process when it was time to renew hardware, and then just the management of those as well too. And so all of that activity for myself and my team, I would say under hardware businesses is we're just more effective now. We spend less time. Increased system performance. We saw a huge jump by moving off of that old hardware to OCI, and so you could attribute part of that is sure the age of the hardware, but just I/O speed of the disks and everything. It's just been much better in OCI. I talked a little bit about disaster recovery. Way simpler for us now. We took a 72-hour window down to 4 to 6 hours. I say 4 hours for EBIZ, 6 hours for everything. So we just finished our annual DR test in this past November, and everything you saw on the slides of the workloads that we lifted to OCI within a 6-hour window on a Sunday in November. We shut down in Virginia, flipped over to Phoenix, brought those systems online, users logged in, we conducted tests, we shut them down, flashed those DR databases back to the point that the DR test started, and brought Virginia up. And we did all of that in 6 hours. So really just from a DR stance, we're light years ahead of where we were. And honestly, we've kind of set the model that our other infrastructure and architecture teams really try to follow now on campus when they're developing client-based systems. That they really leverage a lot of and model a lot of what we did in this project into their solutions going forward. Alyssa talked about this earlier, and I'm glad she brought it up because I forgot to mention it. But when we were on-prem, we had no redundant servers, no high availability, no load balancers. We were running a single node EBIZ, a single node custom apps, and so all of that now is high availability with a real-time data guard over to Phoenix. And then I touched on it, greater security, right? Data encrypted at rest. So the security guys love that. And then, obviously we're on modernized hardware. So, really just we're more secure, better performance, scalability is all better. If you go to the next slide, please.
Yeah, and I'll, as we're moving to the next slide, I will make one comment on the performance. We saw like 10 times faster. So a report that was running in 2.5 hours now runs in 10 minutes. So just to kind of give you an idea of the performance, and it touched every user. I had one of the users that only goes in to put time in. I mean, they really don't go into the Oracle system on a regular basis. And he came up to me, he goes, Alyssa, that time system is wicked fast, right? So everybody that put in time into the system had an impact and saw that it was, Oracle's not getting the bad rap anymore. It's the system that performs the best.
Yep. So this slide, you saw this slide before. I recycled it and I added some check marks. So and really that's what I'm going to focus in on the next slide. And before we go there, so we went to OCI in August of 2018. And you heard me mention, Discover to BIX to OAC. So I guess go ahead and go to the next slide, Alyssa, for me. And so really, since we've been there, we've purchased more from Oracle. So we switched over to the universal crowd credit model. And as part of that, that's when I purchased Oracle Analytics Cloud and Autonomous Data Warehouse. And so really the point of this is, I'm controlling my costs better because I'm able to bundle more services together now in OCI and achieve better discounts. And so we inked that deal last April of 2019. I'm happy to report we're already on OAC, and I'll talk about that a little bit more here in a minute. But so we're moving our workload from 2-node racks over to Exadata machines. And so Alyssa's and the Oracle consulting team, they're actually helping us with that right now. We just finished up moving our test environment last week. So development and test environments have been moved from 2-node racks to Exadata devices, and we're moving all of the production databases coming up here in the month of April. We're going to be moving all of those workloads to Exadata devices in Ashburn. And what we're seeing again is another huge performance jump when we look at how things were running in dev and test on the 2-node architecture in OCI, and now when we do performance metrics against those same jobs on the Exadata devices, we're seeing another huge jump. So excited to see that roll into production here in the next month. I talked about ADW and OAC, the adoption there. So just to kind of give you an idea, when we ran Discover, we had around 100 users that used Discover. And when I purchased BIX, we really scaled that back to about 80 folks that were using BIX. Well, since we went to OAC, adoption is now, we have 325 people that use OAC, Oracle Analytics Cloud, in our environment, running with autonomous database underneath that. And some exciting things are going on there too. We're implementing auto scaling with autonomous data warehouse. So the environment self-scales up and down CPUs based on demand, and there's a couple different ways to do that. So if you're interested in those, I can share more about that, but just pay attention because one is almost instantaneous. Anyway, there's some pretty technical stuff around that. I'm not going to go into it, but really cool stuff we're doing there that's ultimately going to save costs, because when it scales back at night, we're not consuming those CPU and thus burning as many credits. Again, another security win here. When I purchased the UCC last April, we've recently spun up Identity Cloud Service, and we've integrated that with the e-business suite. So now we're providing a true single sign-on experience for our users. So when they log into, say, Office 365 or a SharePoint site, and we want to punch them over into the e-business suite, they simply click the URL and it single signs them right into the product. If they're at home and they want to sign into the product, you get all of the multi-factor authentication that comes with Microsoft's Office 365 Azure product and leverage that. So again, the security teams just love the fact that A, we're hooked up to the network credentials, and B, that all the MFA functionality comes along with that. And then really this was, I don't think there's really ever been a time that this has probably been more beneficial to us. And I talk about increased user satisfaction and increased agility. Well, here's an example. So, and I just talked about it around MFA. We recently spun up a third node for the e-business suite, put a load balancer in front of that, and expose that to the internet. And so really, the last step of this is speed. My team and I, we really talk about doing things in days and weeks versus weeks and months. And so, the idea to expose that stuff to the internet and until the time we actually did it was about a 3-week period, so we're just agility and speed. We're really able to add a lot of value to the organization. So I don't know, Lisa, if
Great.
you have anything else you want to add there, but.
No, that was great. I think just all the things that we've been able to provision, and then the time period we've been able to provision them, I think is could not have been done on premise. So being on OCI.
Yeah. So when I say never, I didn't really tie my thoughts together there. You know, when you think about what's going on in the world today with the coronavirus, I mean, I don't know how many of you on the call, your ERP system is exposed to home workers. But you know, the experience we had prior to this, folks needed to log into Citrix and then launch go through a multi-step process, just even gain access to the e-business suite. And so, you know, it is very achievable with not a lot of effort to start to expose that directly to the internet now. So that's what we were able to do.
Now, thanks, Ron. And in the interest of time, what I'm going to do, we've got 5 minutes left. I'm going to go ahead and put these lessons learned up on the screen so everybody can read them. And then I'm going to give Mike an opportunity to ask us if there's any questions. We can answer questions while people are reading about the lessons learned.
All right, thank you, Alyssa. We definitely do have some questions. I did want to also touch on what Ron just spoke about with the coronavirus. Do you ever think back of where you were before this process is and how much that would have affected you during this time of everyone working from home?
Oh yeah, it's been it's been a huge saver for us because we had limited Citrix capacity too. And so, you know, all of the people that need to consume, you know, the e-business suite, our custom apps, the MarkView product, we're able to now direct those folks directly to those services in OCI, and they're not chewing up Citrix capacity. So, you know, our infrastructure team scrambled last week. We had a few servers laying around. We were able to add about 5 or 6 servers to our Citrix farm. You know, but we're running on the edge, right? We weren't really scaled to let the whole company work from home. It's working. So this certainly was an enabler to help keep users moving along. And we would not have been able to do that before. No way.
Perfect. Thank you, Ron. Again, to all attendees, we do have a lot of questions, but if you do have questions, please type it into the question box of your control panel at any time, and we'll get to as many questions as we can. We'll run this. We may run over a little bit, but we'll continue to post questions. The first question for you is, DR is also in OCI?
Yeah, so our production environments run in Virginia, Ashburn. Our disaster recovery environment is in the Phoenix data center. We have real-time VPN connections to both the Ashburn, Oracle's Ashburn data center and Phoenix's data center.
And so when he talked about doing the disaster recovery test, that's what we were doing, is failing over from Ashburn into Phoenix, bringing the whole system up, testing, validating, and then flashing back to, you know, where production was prior to the test.
Okay, perfect. Next question. Was it lift and shift from 12.2.5 on-prem to 12.2.5 OCI, or did you upgrade to the latest EBS version of 12.2?
We, in 2016, when we were still on-prem, we went from 11.5.10 to 12.2.5. And then we lifted 12.2.5 into OCI on 2018. Since then, we haven't done a revision upgrade, although that's on the roadmap for this year. So I anticipate within the next 12 months, we'll probably be going to 12.2.8 or 12.2.9. We haven't decided which version yet.
We just felt like, in terms of the what we were trying to accomplish with the platform migration, moving from single node to rack, doing the OCI lift and shift, that was better to leave the application, you know, leave that in place and then do the upgrade later.
Okay, still getting a lot of questions. Next one. You used OCI infrastructure but you are the hosting service company for Maritz. Is that true?
No, so that's a good question. They're subscribing to the services for the infrastructure through Oracle, and we're providing the managed services. So it's hosted, you know, the Oracle Cloud infrastructure is on Oracle and an Oracle site, and we manage from the database up. There's some things the operating system we would do, but the operating system down, so the storage, the automated backups, et cetera, all that's managed by Oracle as part of their subscription to OCI. Does that answer the question?
Perfect. Yeah, well, assume so if he types it in.
So basically, I go to Alyssa's team for my DBA support now, and application support, and then when I need to staff augment around Oracle resources, I also use Cast for that. For all of my network services, security services, anything on-prem that I'm still doing, I still use my Maritz infrastructure team. So I hope that clarifies your question.
Okay. Next up, we've got number one, does it interface to bank, and how is data sent encrypted automatically? And number two, was there any modules implemented during the project timeline, or is it going from on-prem to cloud with existing modules?
Sure, I'll answer that. So we for number two, we did a pure lift and shift. We did not implement any modules during the project timeline. Since we've been in OCI, we've spun up fixed assets and property manager. So those are two new modules. And we've also brought on 2 business units onto the Oracle Project Accounting module. So a lot of work within the e-business suite. As far as interfaces to the banks, you know, we do that a couple different ways. So there's some XML stuff that's going back and forth, and some flat file stuff. Most of that traffic routes back through our VPN to our, and that traffic comes in and out of our Fenton network. I don't have a ton of ingress or egress directly to the OCI environment outside of exposing the third node that we just did. And we did it that way for security reasons, right? We have some data loss prevention software here, and that we like to manage that and inspect the traffic going in and out of the company. So that was more of was a business / security decision versus what we could do. So I hope that answers your question to number one.
Yeah, and I think that points back to that first month when we did the planning and the design, because it's important to have an enterprise architect on the client side as well, because there were things, I mean, they have a full NOC that they use on premise at Maritz that's responsible for everything outside of OCI, but you have to coordinate that, right? So the networking has to go across systems. So that planning phase, that's why it's so important to get those design decisions made up front.
Yeah, and I want to speak for just a minute. You know, if you look over in the lessons learned, you know, we talk about architecture as a critical phase, and then really the next bullet there is select the best internal team members. And really, what I mean by there is mindset's the key, right? Because when you're moving a large workload, like we were the first to do this at Maritz, and when we said, hey, we're going to move our ERP system and all of our financial platforms out of our data center, we're going to move to the cloud. You know, depending on what your role is, whether you're a database guy, a network guy, security, you know, everybody, that raised a lot of eyebrows. And so you just need to make sure you get the right folks on your team with the right mindset, because these projects are hard, right? And I would say that the people part of these projects is every bit, or if not harder, than the technology part. So because there's a lot of folks I selected for the team that was not our number one person in his or her skill set area, but they certainly had the right mindset to help me make this happen. So just pay attention. Team selection is critical.
Yeah, and Ron, I'll just have a mirror thing on that, on the KESS lessons learned, because you know, from our perspective, we partnered with Maritz and we're going to make it work. And as Ron said, there were a lot of bumps in the road. There are a lot of challenges that come up in front of us. But, you know, Ron and I and the rest of the team members had the mindset that this was not going to fail, and we were going to execute and get it live. So I think that's critical to, you know, making it work.
Yeah, and I'll give you an example. You know, I had a person on the team who I can't think any more of this person than I already do. And I really thought he was 100% on board from day one. And it wasn't until after we finished the development migrations, he came to my office and said, you know, I finally get it. I understand why you're doing this. It really is the right thing for Maritz. And really, that's when it became clear to me, you know, most of this is out of fear, you know, and he was happened to be an architect, and you know, most people are fearful of the unknown. And so you got to get the right people, get them educated, get them on board early. I sort of wish I would have had more people involved in the whole eCal process when we first started looking at this, right? Because we had learned so much by the time we made the decision. You know, we had to bring a lot of people along on that education path. So, you know, get people involved early and let them learn, and then that'll reduce the fear and help remove roadblocks.
Perfect. And then Ron, actually a question that I have is what ended up making you decide to choose KESS to help you partner with this project?
Well, we had great success with the R12 upgrade. And, you know, from the minute I met, I mean, it really came down to one person, which is Alyssa. You know, the minute I met her, we just kind of clicked, the way she thinks and the way myself and some folks on my team think. And so, you know,
where did you end up meeting
her? I got introduced to her from my Oracle middleware technology rep when we were considering and upgrading the ERP platform. He did an introduction for me, and we had a couple calls, and I don't know if we actually met and collaborate before we decided or not, Alyssa. It's been so long ago, but
that's a long time ago, Ron.
Yeah, it really was. So, you know, again, I would say select a good quarterback. She was my quarterback to help get this done. You know, go get yourself a Tom Brady, but she's already on my team. So hey, find somebody else.
Okay, we definitely have some more questions, so let's get back to those. Are you running multiple databases as pluggable database, and what are the benefits of CDB PDB architecture?
Okay, I'll answer that, and then Alyssa, you can fill in the blank. So if you move to OCI, you're gonna be required to run in a containerized environment. Okay, so that was something that we recovered from. It works outside of a containered environment, but you're not going to be able to leverage the console and all of the features that OCI brings to the table with the cloud console. So regarding all of the features that it brings, I'm not going to be able to speak to that. I would encourage you to read up on containers and pluggable databases, but everything, we run 4 separate containers that house all of our pluggable databases. So if you're running on-prem today, each instance, just think of that as a pluggable, yeah, thank you very much. Each instance of that, think of that as a pluggable database. And in the end, we made decisions around containers based on 2 primary factors. One, we looked at the character sets that those pluggable databases were running in, and if there were restrictions or requirements around character sets, we organized those into the same container. And then 2, we made the decision to keep the e-business suite in its own container and the custom apps database in its own container, just from we felt from an upgrade standpoint to isolate those in individual containers reduce the amount of risk and complexity that we had to deal with. So a couple things you need to look at there during those decision factors. I would say get your Oracle architect involved, and he or she will be able to help you make those decisions around containers and pluggable databases.
Perfect. Next question, did you see any security concerns with OCI infrastructure?
So that you can come at that question from a couple different angles. One, I felt it improved our overall security stance with data encryption at rest, so that was a big win. When we first went to OCI, we were not able to download any of the security logs to import into our SIM system, Security Incident Management. Since that time, Oracle's came back and they've added that to the. I mean, they're constantly adding stuff to the platform and the environment. And so, that's been a win. We've been able to go back and re-engage with our security team, and we're now downloading those security logs to our SIM system. So certainly, I didn't have any concerns, but the security team wasn't happy about that day one. But if you're looking to go there now, Oracle solved that for you. Outside of that, I can't think of anything else we were concerned about.
Okay.
Actually, I'll say one more thing around that. One of the things that really sold me on the whole Oracle platform is their approach. So, they're doing things a little different than Amazon and Azure in the fact that by default, when you spin an instance up in OCI, all of the ports are shut off by default. Nothing's open. So if you think a traditional server, you deploy that in your data center or Amazon, you got to put a firewall around it to protect that server. I'm not pretending that you don't need a firewall on OCI. I still think that's a good idea, but you have to explicitly go open up the ports that you want to have traffic flow on into these servers. So it's just inherently, because of their architecture and their design, it's more secure. At least we felt it was more secure than other platforms, right from the get-go. So.
Okay. Then the that question that's in the chat area now, did you evaluate migrating to Oracle Cloud Apps versus staying with EBS? What was your decision making around that?
To be brutally honest, I tried to evaluate that. I had a business unit technology leader that at the time that was not on board with moving to the SaaS version, specifically around the inventory module. He felt that at the time we were back in 2016. At the time we were doing that, he felt that the product was not mature enough, and so we were pushing rope up a hill to try to gain support for that, and we needed to move forward. So we opted to upgrade to R12 and then move to OCI. Now I do believe that within probably the next 3 years we'll be evaluating again. Do we stick with the e-business suite, or do we start to move into more of a hybrid model and start to leverage the SaaS environment? Because I'm of the personal belief that the platform has the functionality that we need at Maritz, and that it would work fine for us. So I think if you ask me in 3 to 5 years from now, you'll probably get a different answer.
And I will say that that was our first formal engagement with Maritz back in, I think it was even the end of 2015, where we came in and did an assessment at that time, upgrade to 12.1, upgrade to 12.2, or go to ERP Cloud. And so, at KEST, we do a lot of we initiate a lot of our engagements with our clients with that type of assessment. And that's really where we, got started. And as Ron said, at that point in time, the ERP cloud wasn't mature enough to take care of some of the functional requirements that they had. And so, the other thing I would say, again, moving to OCI, they really protected their EBS investment. So you saw from a custom application what kind of investment they've made. And so all of that would either have to be moved over to PaaS and rewritten possibly, or have that functionality in the ERP cloud. So they do have quite a bit of investment, not just in the EBS standard applications, but in the custom applications that they've built to serve their business requirements.
Thank you, Alyssa. Okay, next, did Ron say you do not in-house support staff for Oracle ERP after moving into OCI?
No, that's incorrect. I still have a staff. I have around 10 or 11 technical folks that are involved with supporting all of those technology platforms that you saw. And I have around, actually probably 15 folks. And then I have about a dozen folks that are more business analysts, functional SMEs type that report up to me as well. So supporting those platforms, you saw roughly 25 people-ish. I have our HCM platform Workday. I'm responsible for that, and I have a whole other side of my department that support a lot of Microsoft technology stacks. So really, my organization supports all the back office software at our company, not just the financials. But I'd say about 24 people in total.
And they do the things like any reporting. They have Apex, so they do any of the development. They're doing still the development, the functional support. The KES managed services team is taking the load off from supporting the infrastructure databases, the middleware servers that are on there, that piece of the workload.
Okay. Next, what integration tool compatible? Not sure when that was at.
Well, I think I understand the question. I don't have a middleware product per se that we've purchased. Like I'm trying to think of some names of those.
I see. Oracle Integration Cloud.
Right. Thank you very much. So we do most everything. Either, if you look on the left side here, we'll do Xena is a file transfer tool. So if we're doing a flat file integration, we use the Xena product to move those. We do a lot of database links. So so when we have the arrow between DLog, those purple systems in the cloud, those are database links, right? We're connecting up directly through that and moving data back and forth at a table level between those. And then we use a lot of web services. So we don't have an Oracle integration product or any other integration product at this point in time.
All right, this is a pretty technical question coming up. You moved OAM/OID. Are there any challenges? And then are you using 80 2008 or 2016?
Okay, couple questions in there. We have, I believe we're on 80 2016. As far as challenges around IDCS, it actually went pretty smooth, to be honest with you. We created the account in Azure, created the credentials in IDCS, did the proper integration. We had a little bit of trouble with the logout URL. I seem to, and I don't have the specifics on top of mind around that, but we would click log out of the application, and the page it was directing us to wasn't correct. And so, believe it or not, that we probably spent darn near a week on trying to get that specific issue resolved. But as far as setting it up, now there was some work installing the asserter, the EBS asserter, and getting that installed underneath the WebLogic. That certainly took some effort, but the documentation was pretty clear, and my developer followed it. And really, again, it from beginning to end, I would say that was a 2-week effort to get that from the time we actually started until we saw it work. We probably did it in 2 weeks, and that's not heads down, but that's calendar time.
Okay. When will you have customizations like introduction of a new report? World Cloud Support takes care of it?
The great question. And again, I would say that's kind of that fear factor unknown. We weren't sure the level of access we would have to these systems when we moved them there. My developers still have, just like on-prem, still have the ability to connect up to the Linux image and deploy a new RDF into the environment. So my team does all of the custom report development and deployment into the environment. There's some differences between the 12.1, differences between 11.5 and 12.1 product lines compared to 12.2.5. So you need to be up on that. There's 2 separate file systems. So deployments are a little bit different, but outside of that, my team still does all that work.
And I have to say, this is another benefit of just overall EBS lift and shift to OCI. From your end users, what they see is it's faster. Their experience is exactly the same, right? So I think that's a big benefit. A lot of projects you have to do training, you have to do change management. Now there's change management, yes, in terms of how the system is, but it's on the VBA, the technical side, on the management of the infrastructure. From an end user perspective, they go in day one and they do their job just like they've done the day before.
Okay. Who really monitors OCI hosted environment? Is it Oracle or KEST?
Yeah, so KEST does the monitoring. There again, as I talked about, Oracle is responsible for, like, the operating system. There's parts so like the hypervisors, they would be monitoring, and then down on the storage, all of that's Oracle. So they would monitor that. If there's any problem there, or they're going to do any maintenance, they send emails in advance to say we're doing maintenance at X, Y, and Z time. It shouldn't affect any of your services. We've put redundancies in the system that help with that as well. But anything, operating system up, we're monitoring using, the cloud console. The backups are done automatically through, once you set those up, Oracle has those automated backups, and we can also see those and monitor them. So that's kind of where the dividing line is.
Okay, great. Another question, Ron, what about your global locations, Europe and Pacific regions? Are they also moved to OCI, or are they run on a different ERP system? And then how about the global locations?
So one of our business units that we recently sold, they were running a separate ERP system called IFS. So we've sold them. That's no longer a factor. The rest of our offices that are located outside of the St. Louis area, they all connect in. For the most part, they connect back into Fenton through our WAN and consume services that are hosted here in St. Louis. The recent change to that is us spinning up the third node for a few of these environments and availing that directly to the internet. So in those cases, they're able to hit the URL of our application just like you would Concur, Salesforce, Yahoo, Google, anything else, right? They're consuming them directly. So as far as those remote locations, I am not aware of any what I would call shadow IT, where those other offices are deploying their own services into the Oracle Cloud. I feel I would, from a procurement standpoint, I'm very confident I wouldn't know about that. So they're all just consuming our services. So I hope that answered the question.
Okay. Will the project timeline change if we implement modules related to GPM or GXP?
I'm not familiar with GPM or GXP. Could you elaborate more? Alyssa, are you familiar with that?
No.
I would say this. Let me answer the question this way, and then Alyssa, you can jump in.
Sure.
I would say, and go back to our lessons learned slide, please. I don't know if it's on there or not. If it's not, it probably should be. Yeah, there you go. Third from the last bullet on lessons learned slide. I would say make this your top priority. And by that, I mean, our top priority was getting into OCI. It was not getting into OCI and spinning up extra modules or adding functionality. I mean, you really got to control scope. I feel on it, not just with this project, just in general. That's my mindset when I go into a project. What's the proper amount of scope that we should take on? So I think if you're thinking about spinning up new modules or new functionality as part of a move to OCI, if it's functionality that's outside of what the cloud environment's going to bring to you, I would say take a hard look at what you're trying to get done, and maybe that's a post-migration activity. You know, it's hard to know without what you're really asking, but that's my mindset going in, and I feel we've been successful with that approach.
Yeah, and I think I would add to that, you know, in terms of project timeline, that's really part of that planning activity, because I see that, you know, another client that didn't have the refreshes, you know, we could do it in less time, and we have done it in less time. Other ones, if you have additional scope, it could be more, but it's really individual per what you're trying to accomplish, and to Ron's point, what the scope is.
Yeah, they did respond saying GPM, Oracle quality, manufacturing, where validation needs to be done.
Oh, the validation piece. Yeah, so that's a good question. You know, validation from the quality perspective, you know, FDA requirements or anything like that, does take additional time, but that's true in any project. I don't think it wouldn't be specific to OCI in terms of the validation. That would be true if you were doing, you know, an implementation of EBS on premise or upgrading. So, you know, you would just put your regular time into that. It wouldn't affect it by, you know, it wouldn't expand it just because you were going to OCI. I think that's how I'd say it.
Okay. Last question. Any specific challenges in deploying the product updates, custom versus seeded?
Let me think here. Yeah, I would say one thing that did surprise me a little bit, and we're getting caught up now, and I don't think this is as significant an issue as it was. It took a little while for the quarterly security patches that Oracle releases. For some reason, those were a little bit behind in the OCI environment when we first went there. And then we've been so busy, you know, we really haven't put those on, but we've just started putting on the January, or we have a plan in place now to get caught up with the January 2019 patches. So I think we're beyond that issue. So that was a surprise to me that once we got there, we had some restrictions on what patch set we could put on. Outside of that, there's some minimum versions. I think we had to be on version version 10, or no, not version 10, version 11, or maybe it was version 12 of the database. I don't remember which. So probably look at that to make sure there's some, they're not going to let version 10, at least not to my knowledge, version 10 of the Oracle RDBS run an OCI. You're going to have to be on a supported version. So I would check those. Outside of that, I'm not recalling anything specific. Alyssa, you?
No, I think that, again, to Ron's point, it's not, you need to check the certifications for, and there's OCI specific things, but nothing is that it's been, a barrier.
All right. Well, we got through all the questions. I definitely want to thank Ron and Alyssa. You guys did a fantastic job. And as you can see by the number of questions, it's a very interesting topic for everyone. So I want to thank you very much for presenting. I look forward to you presenting in kind of our Collaborate OETUG online version. And hopefully, Ron and Alyssa, I definitely know you'll be there presenting at a face-to-face kind of OETUG event in the future. So I want to thank everyone for presenting. You guys did a fantastic job.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank
everybody.
you so much. And for those of you that stuck around, appreciate that. I'm happy to answer questions outside of this if you get the contact information from the presentation. If you pop me a note, just either reference the webinar or OCI or something, because as I'm sure all of you do, I get a lot of emails. So do something to make it stick out, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you got.
Yeah, same for me.
Yeah,
go ahead, Mike.
We also have a great forum in the hub, the OETUG hub. If you want to post a question there, I can make sure Alyssa and Ron get it. So again, thanks everyone. Great job. I got a lot of thank yous from the attendees. So thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you.